So a lot of you know me for my classic Land Rover Defenders, but I want to show you some other things that I love to collect. I've had a lot of people see my motorcycles in the background and say, show me some of your motorcycle collection. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to talk about Ducatis. Ducatis, they're romantic, they're sexy. There's something really special about a Ducati, not only the way it sounds, but the way it rides. And with anything that I collect, I'm not into trendy things. I am into things that are timeless. I'm into things that are basically how do I describe that? I think that's the easiest way. They're just timeless, but they have to have a really interesting story. Not only does the company have to have an interesting story, but the individual products or the items that I get, everything that I have has an interesting story that moves me emotionally. And Ducati is no different. And to roll back the clock and talk about Ducati, first of all, you probably already know it's an Italian company. They started in Italy. And Mr. Ducati, Antonio Ducati, started the company in the 1930s. But here's the interesting part. They had nothing to do with motorcycles or anything motorized whatsoever. They were in the business of creating radios and vacuum tubes. So they were into electronics. But the war came, the war left their factory in ruins. So they had to come up with a way to make money. And that's how they accidentally slipped into motorized. So they originally made a motor. It was a clip-on motor that went onto a bicycle, and the English term for it is a puppy. And but the motor was highly successful because now people could have a bicycle that was motorized so they could cover a lot of territory, and it just kind of took off from there. I mean, there's a lot more history to Ducati, but that's how it started. And I think that's just an interesting story that you just never know if you embrace opportunities and you just try, you never know where your company can go. And Ducati's definitely got a legacy behind it. And I'm going to mention again, just the sound of a Ducati, there's like no other. The way they handle, like no other. Ducati's won more races than anybody else. And being that they are Italian motorcycles, just like Italian cars, which I collect too, but they're temperamental. They have their own personality, they have their own quirks, and I think the best way I can describe a Ducati is much like when you go to a dog pound or a pound and you rescue a dog. You know that dog is the dog pound because it has quirks, it has idiosyncrasies. And you bring the dog home and you either learn to love it or you take it back. And it's the same thing with the Ducati. Because a lot of times I'll go to start one of my Ducatis and it won't start. And then I have to fiddle with it. But that's part of the romance of owning a Ducati or a Ferrari versus some of the other bikes I'll talk about. So let's start with this one. This one is the Paul Smart. This one is I'm going to say a cult bike. And anytime there's Facebook groups that have been formed or forums that have been formed specific to a bike, you know it's a timeless vehicle. So this is not caught up in trends. This bike, the Paul Smart, is based off the original Ducati 750 Supersport, which is also known as the green frame, which I've had one of those, and I'm kind of lusting over getting another one again, which those are really, really rare, desirable, and costly. And in fact, there's a lot of counterfeit ones. And that's another point. Anytime you create a product and people are making counterfeits, then you know you've done something really well. So this being the Paul Smart, it looks retro, it looks old school, but it's a 2006 model, and it does have a green frame. This one, interesting story. I found this one on Craigslist, and I kept on calling the guy and calling him, and nobody was answering. And I know a lot of other people were trying to call too, because people were talking about it on the Facebook group, the Paul Smart group, that they'd seen this bike on Craigslist, and they were all having the same problem. They could not get in touch with the guy. Well, I kept on. And I think that's part of collecting, and everything I collect, whether it's a motorcycle, a fountain pen, a car, a watch, whatever it might be, it's the chase. It's the chase that makes it so special. It's learning about it, the research and all that. But So after numerous attempts at trying to call, there was a young man that answered the phone, and I was like, oh, and honestly, I thought it was a scam. And I talked to him, and he explained that it was an older gentleman that owned the bike, and the bike was now in his garage. The gentleman was having a lot of health issues. He had cancer, and part of his, I guess you can say, therapy or time as he was going through chemo was research, and he was researching all the components he wanted to put on this bike. So he bought the bike brand new. He never rode it. And he sent it out. It got a big bore kit. It got carbon fiber wheels. It got a custom suspension, a custom exhaust. So this is a highly modified bike. There is part of the collectors that would want this bike to be completely original, that they wouldn't want you to touch anything on it. But then there's another type of collector that really appreciates these modifications because they were done quite nicely. So it's everything looks like it flows, as I talk about on Land Rovers, and it rides like a dream. It's really powerful. So this is a wheelie machine, quite rare, built in a very limited number. Now if we move over to this one is the 900 MHE. It stands for Michael Halewood. So Michael Halewood was a very successful racer for Ducati, and they built this as a replica bike to honor Michael Halewood. And this is a lot of fun to ride. It's got the dual exhaust in the rear. And I remember the first time that I saw one of these, I was in Europe, and it was a fireman, because he was in his fireman outfit, and he climbed on one of these and started it up, and the sound is magical. And that's what started the search. So I kept on searching, trying to find one, but it's really rare. And for the simple reason that Ducati originally launched this bike in the early 2000s, and they showed it, I believe it was in Geneva at the auto show, and it was a hit. People love this bike. And Ducati said, we're only going to build 2,000 of them, and that's it. So this bike was the first time that Ducati sold a motorcycle online. So they put up a website, they announced the date when you could log in and you could buy this motorcycle. Only 2,000 of them though. And this motorcycle sold out in 31 minutes. Everybody bought all 2,000 of them, and Ducati did some really interesting things with it. So the the bike has a number on it. This is number 1,600 out of 2,000. They also did a t-shirt that was numbered, and so this is a t-shirt that came with the bike originally. The cargo crate was numbered, and even they give you a little plaque, and the plaque is numbered too. So very limited edition. It was on every magazine cover there was. It was talked about. It even made news that this bike was such a cool bike and so sought after. And interesting enough, you would think that the bike would just skyrocket in value. And after a couple of years, you really didn't see them that much anymore because they went into collections. They were in people's living rooms. They were on display. A lot of people didn't ride them, but the value went way down. So what you paid for it originally in the auction was a lot more than what the bike was worth. And it just seemed like no one wanted them because they timed out. People started liking a different style of bike, which I'll show you those bikes. And then just over the last 4 years, there was a tipping point. And now this bike is so desirable, so rare. You'll see them in auctions, but a lot of times they only have like 400 miles, 500, maybe 900 miles. That's it. People just didn't ride them. It's a piece of artwork is what it really is. So they didn't ride them. And now they're selling for anywhere from 4 to 6 times more than what they originally went for on Ducati's website. So highly desirable. And again, you just don't see many of them. So with mine, I am a big believer that I'm not going to save anything for the next guy. I'm not going to keep it perfect for the next guy. I don't abuse anything, but I use all of my stuff. Like this bike I've ridden, when I got it, it had absolutely basically no miles on it, and now it's 1,500 miles. This one's a different story. This is a piece of art. I've had this for a number of years, and this one has 15,000 miles on it. Now, I will tell you that it's a torture rack because you're definitely laid over the tank, but every mile it was full of smiles. So I do ride it. I do enjoy it. And interesting enough, this one I also found on Craigslist too. So it was an ad. I thought it was probably a basket case that the mice had climbed through it and eaten it because the picture was a really bad picture. So was this one too. And I called the guy, and the guy was he was grouchy as it could be. And he started ripping me apart. I didn't even ask for price. I mean, he had the price listed. And he's like, well, if you're really serious about it, you would just come here and you would see it. And I was just asking basic questions. I just wanted to see if it was legitimate or not. Needless to say, he got grouchy. He hung up on me because a lot of people were lowballing him. I gave him a few days. I called him back, and I just opened up the conversation by saying, could I come see the bike? I love that bike. I've been searching for one. I've got a poster of it. I've got the magazine covers. I've got everything. And he's like, yes. Drove out there, and to my amazement, it was pristine. It was beautiful. And 6 hours later, I was loading it on the back of my car, and now I've got a friend for life. So it's interesting how all these bikes, how I acquire them. And then, of course, this Ducati over here is also a little rare. This is a monoposto. This is the Sport 1000. Not as rare as these two, but they just didn't really make many of these. This is a retro bike. So I've ridden this one probably about 3,000 miles. And I'm thinking possibly maybe my most interesting bike. I mean, these are all really, really collectible, but my most interesting bike is this one back here. And this is a Ducati dirt bike. And this is not something that Ducati was known for as dirt bikes. This thing is a chunk of steel. It's a bevel drive, which is really interesting the way the motor actually operates, because all of these motors are belt drives. This one's driven by a shaft with gears on it. This dirt bike is hard to ride. It will kill you. It will rip your head off. It's just the way it is. But the reason that I have this bike is I grew up in Chicago, and my dad wanted to move to Tennessee, and the way he bribed me, he's like, well, we're going to be out in the country, and you can have a dirt bike. Granted, well, I say I grew up, I was really young. I was in 3rd grade. So we moved to Tennessee before we go, and he takes me to a motorcycle shop, and this is the bike that I saw. Not this exact one, but I saw a bike just like this, and that's what I wanted. Keeping in mind, I was about this tall. There was no way I was going to get on this bike, but this is the bike I wanted. My dad said, no, absolutely no, you're not going to get it. And what he ended up getting was a Honda trail bike, a CT70, and you've probably seen those. But they're really wide tires, really short tires, gas tanks under the seat. It looks like a moped. Not to be a brat, but personally, I was a brat. I smiled. I was happy. I was thankful that he got that bike for me, but I always lusted over a true dirt bike. So as I got older, I kept on searching for this bike. This bike is so hard to find. 5 years later, I found this bike in this condition, and I drove many, many hours to be able to go buy this bike, and I got it, and I've yet to restore it, and I don't even know if I'm going to restore it. I bought all the parts to restore it, but I just don't want to restore it. So this is my collection of Ducatis, and before much longer, I am in the negotiation of adding one more, and when I add that, I'll do a video on that. So in an upcoming video, I'll do some more videos on some of the other bikes in my collection. But again, it's my belief that if you stay away from the trendy stuff and you get the timeless stuff, it's only gonna, I think it's gonna make your life more enjoyable, because timeless never goes out of style.